Hello guys, it's Kevork Almasyan of Syriana Analysis. As I promised you yesterday, I'm gonna make a live streaming or live interview with Kerim Hes. He is a Moscow-based analyst specialized on Russian, Turkish, and Eurasian affairs. I'm gonna talk about the recent meeting in Moscow between the defense ministers and the National Security Bureau, heads of the National Security Bureaus of Turkey and Syria. Let's see. I think so. Let's see if we are live. Okay. I think we're live. Yes. But the titles and the need to be changed. So 7 people are watching. Good. I'm gonna host today Kerim Hes. He is a Moscow-based analyst, as I mentioned, to speak about the recent meeting in Moscow between the defense ministers and the chief of, or the head of the national security bureaus of Turkey and Syria, with in mediation of the Russian side. So let's change some of the thumbnails. Okay. I just need 2 minutes, guys, to arrange the live streaming. I hope you don't mind. Okay. I think that's way better now. If you guys can just let me know if you can see me. I will just go to the live stream now, and I apologize for this technical small problem, but we still have 2 minutes for Karim to join the interview anyways. But I wanted to jump in a little bit earlier so that, okay, I think this is it, yes. Guys, can you please write in the chat? Yes, everything sound is okay. Great. Okay. We just need 1 more minute for Karim to jump into our interview, which is going to happen at 19 Central European time sharp. Okay. This is good. This is good. And this is good. I'm going to play just a quick reportage for you from an Indian channel speaking about this. Okay. So.
Now, in a clear sign of normalization between Ankara and Damascus in the decade-long Syrian war, defense ministers of Russia, Turkey and Syria held a meeting in Moscow. The talks were the first ministerial-level meeting between Turkey and Syria since the start of the Syrian conflict 11 years ago. Turkey said its defense minister, Hulusi Akar, met with his Syrian counterpart, Ali Mahmoud Abbas, along with Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu. A Turkish Defense Ministry statement also said the Turkish, Syrian, and Russian intelligence chiefs attended the talks in Moscow, which took place in a positive atmosphere. The discussion focused on the Syrian crisis, refugee problem, and efforts for joint struggle against terror organizations present on Syrian territory. Turkey said that the three nations would continue to hold trilateral meetings. Russia has long been pressing for a reconciliation between Turkey and the Syrian government, Russia and Turkey are both involved in Syria, with Moscow supporting the Damascus regime, its opponents, and Ankara backing rebels. The meeting came amid repeated threats by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan to launch a military offensive in northern Syria against Kurdish groups.
So this is a quick overview of the news. The defense ministers and the chief of the national security bureaus of Turkey and Syria have held a very important meeting in Moscow with the mediation of President Putin. And it seems that the atmosphere was quite positive. And the Syrian Defense Ministry said that the meeting was positive, and they have discussed several topics. I think the most important topics in this regard are related to the Turkish presence in Syria, the occupation forces, disarming the jihadists and the Kurdish militias, in addition to the fate of 3.5 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. I think if the Syrian Ministry of Defense says that the meeting was positive, they weren't exaggerating in this regard.
Hello.
Hello, Kerim. How are you doing? Thank you very much for joining me on Syriana Analysis.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I will just quickly turn off this video. Okay, good. Kerim, you are a Moscow-based analyst on Russian, Turkish, and Eurasian affairs. It's a really pleasure to have you on Syriana Analysis. Actually, defense ministers of Russia, Turkey, and Syria have held talks in Moscow in a clear sign of normalization between Ankara and Damascus in the decade-long Syrian war, right? Now, the Turkish defense minister Hulusi Akar and the head of its national intelligence organization Hakan Fidan met Syrian defense minister Ali Mamlouk Abbas and Syrian intelligence chief Ali Mamlouk in Moscow, along with Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu. The Turkish defense ministry said on Wednesday. Usually the Syrian side used to keep such meetings secret or deny such meetings happened, but this time the Syrian Ministry of Defense said the two sides discussed many files and the meeting was positive. Now, before we discuss the recent meeting between Syrian and Turkish security officials in Moscow, relations between Damascus and Ankara were very good before 2011, right? But these relations dramatically deteriorated as Erdogan's Turkey played an essential role in the regime change war in Syria. Why has Erdogan chosen to join the war against his, if it's correct to say, ex-friend like Assad, right? And what has recently changed for Turkey to reconsider its policy towards Syria?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation also once again, and it's my pleasure to participate in your program. And if to answer your question, actually, many things has changed since 2011, and Turkey has learned a lot, I think. But there are also so many things that Turkey will experience in the following months and years, probably. But the crucial issue here is that Turkey's ambitions, or the ambitions of Turkish leadership, didn't match the Turkey's capacity, actually, Turkey's potential. It is the most important lesson that Turkey should learn, I think, in my opinion, after a decade-long war in Syria, and it has so many regional repercussions. So the huge gap between Turkey's ambitions and Turkey's capacity, Turkey's potential was understood. This is the first issue that I would like to mention. But the more important, maybe from time to time, and we came to today, we can say that, for example, in 2011, right, Turkish economy was quite enough big and influential. Turkey was a de facto EU candidate country, and Turkey has a perspective in membership to the EU. And Turkish economy, Turkish democracy also was quite in a better situation than now, exactly. And Turkey has done, and Erdogan government has done till 2011, maybe we can say, that so many reforms in economy, in democratic situation of Turkey and so on. But after the elections in 2011, And after the 2010 referendum in Turkey, Erdogan has consolidated his power and tried to exclude the other actors from politics, and turned into a one-man rule actually in the following years after 2011. So probably he also has seen himself as a new caliph of the Muslim world. He ideologically was close to the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And the AKP also, the Justice and Development Party under Erdogan leadership, is also so close to the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. So, for example, not only in Syria, but Turkish politics, Turkish leadership, or Turkey's involvement, actually, we can see in Egypt, in Tunisia, maybe we can say also in Yemen, in the later period, and so on. So probably Erdogan has seen a chance to change the regime in Syria and to change the Assad, and to change Assad with a puppet, for example, right? A Turkish puppet maybe, but it didn't happen. So and the mistakes have paved the way to other mistakes, actually. The Kurdish problem appeared later on. Security concerns, Turkish security concerns also arised after some time. The jihadist groups, terrorist elements were supported by, unfortunately, Turkish government during the period. And now what has changed? One of the main things that should be discussed today, I think, it is the elections in Turkey. It is the upcoming elections in Turkey in 2023, and Turkish economy quite suffers nowadays. The official inflation rate has reached 80% or 90%, but unofficial inflation rates is more than 180. And the refugee problem is the second big problem for Turkish people, Turkish society. Actually, the opposition parties are using that card against Erdogan before the elections. There are so many other issues, security issues, from security concerns from various jihadist groups, terror groups, and so on. The Kurdish problem is another issue that can be used in domestic politics. So before the elections, Erdogan is hugely in need to normalize his relations, not only with Syria, but, as you know, in the last 10 months, we can see that he tries to make a reset in relations with Israel, with the United Arab Emirates, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt. Just recently, a month ago, he met with Egyptian leader El-Sisi in Qatar. So it was also another U-turn, actually, in Turkey, in Turkish regional politics. So the last and the most difficult, the most complicated U-turn, I can say, it was with Syria, and we can now see the clear signs that Erdogan tries to normalize, or at least give an image that he has an intention to normalize his relations, Turkey's relations with Syria, actually. So the main problem is, in my opinion, the elections, I can say. And of course, there are also other, as I said, economic problems, refugee problems, and so on.
Kerim, in my humble opinion, a Turkey, or a neutral Turkey, or a Turkey as a positive force in the region, will reflect also positively on the security and the peace in the entire region. And when there is peace established in the region, I think economic integration between the regional countries would become a goal, right? This is something that Assad and Erdogan, I think they're working on between 2005 and 2010 until the regime change war started in Syria. And I personally, as a Syrian and also from Armenian origins, I don't mind having good relations with Turkey, as long as Turkey has also good intentions towards Syria, right? At the end of the day, I think the people of the region will have to live together, and the best formula, in my humble opinion, to establish a lasting peace is to have economic integration, which avoids such security events that happened after 2011. Now, there were several meetings between security officials of Syria and Turkey in the past 2 years, but the last one this week was reported by the state-run media, and the meeting was described positive by the Syrian Ministry of Defense. Can we say that negotiations between the two parties are already in their advanced stages? And what are main topics of agreements and disagreements between the both sides?
I think it is showing that the meetings are advancing. Sure, it is. I agree with that, but I would also like to add a remark. Actually, as you said, till the war, till the start of the war in Syria, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon have established a visa-free trade region, actually, and also as Schengen in Turkish, as it is similar to Schengen, right?
Yep.
In Europe. So there is a huge chance that has already been, which has already been actually in the past, actually has stayed in the past. And so today, this meeting was openly declared, and it was professionally, in my opinion, it was organized. And if you look at the press releases of Turkish and Russian defense ministers' social media accounts, we have heard about that meeting from Turkish and Russian sides. As far as I don't know Arabic, but as far as I know, in Arabic also, they released the press release at the same time at 6 o'clock 2 days ago. So, and also, if you look at the press releases of all of the three sides, we can see that there is an exactly the press release of all of the sides are exactly the same. There are three sentences. The first one is about the meeting that they met and so on. The second sentence was about the issues that were discussed. The first one was Syrian crisis. It shows that both of the sides, Turkey and Syria, they need to re-establish the diplomatic channel in the highest level, in my opinion. And the second one is the refugee problem. It addresses to Turkey's concerns mostly, but also Syria's. But the third one was about the fighting against terrorism and against extremist groups. And all of three issues in a sequence were mentioned in Turkish and Russian defense ministries' press releases. And as far as I know, it was also same in Syria's defense ministers also press release. So there is an harmony, in my opinion. There is a coordination, not only at what time to publish, to declare, to announce such a meeting, the details of the meeting, but also about the details of the issues that were discussed, that all of the sides gave importance during the meeting and so on. So in my opinion, probably we will see in the following months another meetings between defense ministers. Probably we will see maybe the fourth, the second, the third, and so on. But also probably before the elections, I think the Minister of foreign ministers of both countries will also gather in Sochi, maybe in Moscow. But I can say that Erdogan really wants to have a meeting with Assad before the elections, because he really needs to give the image to the Turkish public that not somebody else, not other possible opposition candidates, but he himself can solve the refugee problem in Turkey and so on. So he needs to give such a photo with Assad, maybe in Moscow or in Sochi and so on. So in that sense, in my opinion, also for Russia in Turkey's election, Erdogan is the favorite candidate also. We should also underline it.
Yes.
Even though Erdogan is one of the most difficult partners of Moscow in many issues, in regional issues and in bilateral relations and so on, but still Russia prefers to see Erdogan after the elections in Turkey, in my opinion, rather than İmamoğlu or Istanbul Mayor or Kılıçdaroğlu and so on, or somebody else. So in my opinion, the Russian side also requests Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad, to have a meeting with Erdogan before the elections in Turkey. So it will not be a surprise for me if we witness such a meeting in Sochi before the elections, before June or May.
That would be really interesting to see Assad and Erdogan meeting again after 11 years of war, when Erdogan vowed to pray in Al Umayyad Mosque in 2011. I think he made this statement, which means like he's coming to Syria as an Islamic opener. He's going to liberate this territory from the infidels or whatever. Like it was, this 10 years was very instrumental, in my opinion, in the history of the region, and Turkey played a very, very destructive role. Just this is my opinion, because I also come from Aleppo, and we've seen the groups who were funded and supported by Turkey, what have they done in the city. And at the end of the day, in politics, in real politics, if both sides cannot really exterminate the other side, then they have to sit on the table. The only problem was that Syria, if you follow the foreign policy of Syria, for example, in Lebanon, the civil war in Lebanon, they always had this long-term, patient foreign policy approach. But the war in Lebanon was on the Lebanese territories, so the victims were mostly also from the Lebanese people. But this approach that Syria adopted in Syria, betting that in the future the circumstances will change, and it changed now. But 500,000 civilians and or people died in Syria during the discourse of this war, which is a very huge number, and the entire infrastructure, the industry sector, etc., in Aleppo, for example, has been destroyed. And that's very sad after like 11 years for such a war. But one of the topics on the negotiation table is the presence of Kurdish militias on the borders with Turkey, right? Turkey wants them 30 kilometers away from the border, and I think Syrian side doesn't mind that. But in your opinion, is there a win-win solution for the issue of this issue, or the Kurds are going to pay the higher price after a compromise?
There is a win-win position, but it is not in favor of Kurds, I can say. They can continue to pay a high price for a possible cooperation between Turkish and Syrian armies. In fact, if to be honest, both Turkey and Syria, in my opinion, couldn't manage their Kurdish problem for many decades, actually. They didn't try to recognize the rights of Kurds, universal human rights of their own Kurdish citizens, and so on. And still today, for example, there is a very deepening Kurdish problem in Turkey also, and Turkey didn't solve its own Kurdish problem and tries to solve some other country's Kurdish problem. It's a kind of ridiculous, right? So situation, but still, if to be also frank, in my opinion, there is a possible room for a cooperation between Ankara and Damascus, at least till the elections in Turkey, because Erdogan also needs a kind of a military operation, a symbolic or a limited land military operation in northern Syria against Kurdish groups, so that he can sell it as a victory for the Turkish public. He can demonize the Kurdish people in Turkey also. He can demonize the pro-Kurdish party HDP, and he can drive a wedge between the other opposition parties and the pro-Kurdish party before the elections. It will be a huge gain for Erdogan. And also he can play on the nationalistic and on the rising nationalistic views and tendencies in Turkish society, because he is also in ally with the Turkish nationalistic party, nationalist party, ultra-nationalist party, MHP, and so on. So a military operation actually before the elections is really in favor of Erdogan's stay in power. In that context, we can say that, and I think during the negotiations, they also talk about that, a possible new military operation of Turkey against US-backed Kurdish groups on northern Syria. But also, in my opinion, for the Syrian government, Assad government, it is also quite strict, in my opinion, in its Kurdish vision. I am not sure, but Assad government, Syrian government also is not recognizing or is in a situation that the Kurds will be accepted in a new Syria as it was in 2011. Maybe there can be a kind of a cultural autonomy, but we will probably see if the Kurds are going to be integrated into Syria, into Syrian new state structure. Probably the Kurdish rights of the Kurdish people will not be recognized in 100%, and their situation will be more or less as before 2011. So if there is a bargaining process here, in my opinion, between Turkey through Russia with Syria. So if the Syrian government can get a kind of a control of some of the territories, for example, in southern Idlib, maybe, if Turkey-backed jihadist groups are going to be withdrawn from the southern Idlib, and the M4 highway is going to be transferred to Assad government's control, I think it will also be an important gain for Assad government, right, for the economic concerns and so on. So there is a possibility that Turkey and Syria, through the Russian mediation, can reach such a solution, or such a military solution, I mean, and they can make a deal that can let the way Turkey to launch a new military operation in northern Syria, a limited operation, a symbolic operation. But before the elections, it will be, as I said, a huge gain for Erdogan. It will be, Kurds are going to pay a high price in that sense, if it happens actually. But in my opinion, it is possible because, as I said, Russia also wants Erdogan to stay in power after the elections in Turkey. So Russia can also give a kind of a green light or yellow light to the Turkish army to launch such an operation. As you know, the Syrian airspace is mostly controlled by Russian side, and so Russia should open the airspace of Syria for Turkey to launch such an operation.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the issue of the Kurdish issue in Syria, from the Damascus point of view, they're not going to give the Kurds more than administrative autonomy and cultural rights. For example, the Minister of Education in Syria says they're ready to allow the Kurds to teach Kurdish in their areas and give them administrative autonomy, which the Kurds see that that's not enough for them, right? So I think the Russian side will play the balancing force here so that the Kurds would not be pushed under the bus at the end of the day. And nobody, I think, in Syria wants to push the Kurds under the bus, especially the people. I think they are a very important component of the Syrian people. They are rich in culture, they are rich in their civilization, and they are an added value for Syria, just like the Armenians, just like the Yazidis, just like any other component of the Syrian society. Now, if Russia plays this mediator role between Syria and Turkey, I wonder what is the position of the United States in this regard?
In my opinion, the United States is strategically not against a new military operation of Turkey in Syria, in northern Syria, actually. Even though the Kurds are the main allies of the United States in Syria, on the other hand, Turkey is a NATO country. Erdogan is a great asset for NATO, actually. There is no any other NATO leader that could militarily intervene in Russian backyard, in Russian right in ex-Soviet states, for example, in Karabakh issue and so on. Turkey has played a role of in Russia in NATO's strategy of containing Russia, actually, in Syria, for example, in Libya, and in recent years in the post-Soviet territory, in South Caucasus, for example, nowadays, and in Ukraine also, Turkey sends to Ukraine so many weapons and so on. So I mean, Erdogan and Turkish leadership also is supported by the United States in this regard, I think so. Actually, both Kurds and Turks are allies of the United States, if to say frankly. So I don't think that the United States is going to be, for example, let me say like that. For example, in Afrin, right? I don't think that when Turkey has launched an operation in Afrin in 2018, the United States has lost something else. No, Turkish army entered into Syrian territory, so Turkey could stop actually Syrian government's progress, advancement in the region, and also Turkey stopped the Russian advancement, actually, the realization of Russian vision of the Syrian settlement also. So if to say frankly, for the United States, there are a few strategic aims, in my opinion, of Washington in Syrian arena. The first one is the fact that the Syrian state couldn't reach its previous levels before 2011. So there should be a kind of a quasi-state of Kurds or quasi-autonomy of Kurds in northern Syria and eastern Syria and so on. The second maybe aim of the United States is to secure or to secure Israel so that the Arab states cannot be a threat for Israel and so on. And maybe we can say that for the United States, the terrorism threat, so that one of the aims is that the terrorism threat doesn't come to the United States territory and so on. So there should be a kind of a fight against the terrorist groups and so on. But one of the most important aims of the United States, in my opinion, was to put some obstacles in front of the realization of Russian vision of this Syrian settlement, actually. So and containment of Russia in Syria and so on, to stop the Russian factor advancement of the Russian influence in Syria and in the Middle East in general. So Turkey has played quite an important role here. So tactically, in my opinion, the United States is maybe against a Turkish military operation, a new military operation, but strategically, it can really still continue to give a green light to the Turkish leadership, actually. So maybe about the normalization process, I can also add that the United States strategically again is not against maybe is not going to encourage Turkish government to normalize its relations with Syria, but on the other hand, it is not going to block Turkey to have a reset with Damascus, actually. And Syria is Turkey's neighbor, not the United States. And Turkish economy is suffering nowadays, mostly, not the United States. But also Turkey has a quite a huge refugee problem, not the United States, not the Americans. So there should be a kind of an understanding between the United States and Turkey if a military operation occurs in northern Syria before the elections. Of course, there can be some tensions between Biden and Erdogan governments, but it is not going to turn into a kind of a military clash between Turkish and American armies or soldiers in Syria. I think so. It will be a manageable crisis. It will be a manageable tension, in my opinion.
Actually, the United States was threatening regional countries like do not open up with Syria or do not establish ties with Syria, but see the United Arab Emirates restore ties, Bahrain restore ties,
Yeah.
and I think it's time also for Saudi Arabia to restore ties with Syria, Jordan, and all these countries all the economies are interconnected. Syria is a gateway for Turkey and to Europe, and all these countries are suffering economically because of the entire situation in Syria. And at the end of the day, these countries also have their own national interests, their own economic interests. And I truly believe that the United States wouldn't weigh in like on a security level or a military level to block these countries in restoring ties with Syria. Maybe there would be some diplomatic statements from here or there, but these countries aren't going to really abide by what Biden says if their economy. You mentioned the inflation in Turkey is over 120%, over 180%. It's very, very high. Here in Germany, we suffer only, I think, 8 to 10% inflation. They say, although the prices are 30% to 40% are more expensive, and it's unbearable for the working class, right? Middle class and lower middle class is. How can they survive in this situation? The salaries have become really 30% at least lost their value. But the interesting thing here, and I want to end up this conversation with you with this question: if a deal is made between Syria and Turkey, do you expect any sort of pressure on the American occupation forces on the eastern shores of the Euphrates? Do you expect withdrawal of the American forces from Syria if such a deal happens between Turkey and Syria? Because the United States is the one who is sponsoring the SDF or the Kurdish militias, right?
Yeah. Of course, there will be relatively a pressure on American troops in Syria, but it will not bring in a short term withdrawal of the American troops from Syria. Actually, I think so. Maybe in the middle and in long run, actually, we can see such a solution. But there will be a pressure. On the other hand, the main issue will be not the Kurdish problem in Syria, but first of all, the terrorism threat, the jihadist groups, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, terrorist groups, and so on. And as you know, the Syrian officials have a few times made some statements that Syria has two main conditions from Turkey, that Turkey should cut off its military support or any kind of support, financial and so on, to the jihadist groups, to radical groups in Syria. And the second one, there should be a deadline for the withdrawal of Turkish troops from Syria. But again, here, I also think that these conditions could not be satisfied, if to be realistic, in short term. But again, it is a bargaining process. It will be the negotiations, I think, will continue for a long time, and probably they will mostly focus on transferring some part of these jihadist groups from southern Idlib to other regions, or maybe some other. There will be some deals about the other territories between Turkey and Syria and so on. But the pressure on the American forces will increase. But as I said, for the Americans, in my opinion, both Kurds and Turks are allies. So it doesn't matter in general who controls, for example, Kobane, Turks or Kurds, actually. Of course, it will be a kind of a negative image for the American troops if the United States give a yellow light for Turkish army to control, to intervene, to occupy Kobani and so on. But on the other hand, the United States can still support the Kurds, continue its relations with the Kurds, and this relationship is still manageable, I can see. Even though I think, in my personal opinion, none of the operations of Turkey, military operations of Turkey in Syria, are in Turkey's own interests. But if, to be frank, there is a kind of a room for maneuver for Erdogan at this, on one side, normalizing his relations with Assad, but on the other hand, he can also launch a military operation against Kurds and still manage his relations with both Russia and the United States and Syria, actually. So that's the perspective, short-term perspective of Turkish leadership, in my opinion.
I know I told you this is the last question, but our mutual friend Sarkis Kasavjian, he's asking he posed a question in the live chat. He says he's asking you, do you think that Russia is still keen on keeping the rules of engagement with the United States in Eastern Euphrates?
I think so, yeah, because Russia really doesn't need a new front, a new front with the United States or with the Western countries in other regions. For example, in Azerbaijan and Armenia relations, there is also a problem there for Russia. Russia doesn't want to get into a conflict with Azerbaijani side. Because Russia is already mostly locked in Ukraine, actually, on the ground. So probably, in my opinion, the conflicting agreement between the United States and Russia is going to be observed in the near future, at least.
Kerim Has, thank you very much for joining Syriana Analysis and sharing your valuable insight with the audience of Syriana Analysis. I'm very sure that they appreciate your analysis and commentaries. Where can they follow your work if the followers want to see your work?
Actually, I live in Moscow. They can follow me in Twitter, Kerim Has, or in Telegram, mostly also. So these are my others, actually.
Guys, I will post the link of Kerim's Twitter account in the description below if you would like to see his work and his approach towards these conflicts. Please go and hit him a follow on Twitter. Kerim, thank you so much again for joining my show. And guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're new, please consider subscribing and share this video with your friends and maybe the surrounding those who want to understand what's going on nowadays between Syria and Turkey. And if you want to support my independent work, you can become a patron, and there are so many means in the description below. And see you next time.